Hello and welcome to Grace to Endure. In this video series, we're going to be talking about how to prepare for a world in crisis, which, of course, we talk a lot about the end times on this channel. And so we want to just talk about very practical things that we can do. And I hope that you guys will enjoy learning a lot of very practical tips. And I have with me Susan because she has been kind of researching this and looking into this. Not she doesn't want to be thought of as like a professional on it, but just she has been doing research for about 20-ish years and just kind of thinking this way. And so we just wanted to talk about it with you and hopefully give you a different way of thinking, especially as the world, basically the cursed world, is just going to, the description of Revelation just seems like the world is kind of in trouble, right? There's a lot of natural disasters. There's some man-made disasters. There's just a lot going on, a lot of disturbances. So how do we handle that? How do we think differently? And so Susan's here to help us think about that.
Okay.
So then also just, I always like to, talk to each guest about, the gospel, just so that you guys know where they're coming from and you can hear that they are, in fact, a born again believer. So Susan's just going to tell us a little bit about the gospel or her story, a little bit about herself.
Okay. Well, I was raised in a church, so I had a good background with some Bible knowledge, but I didn't become saved until I was 30, when a crisis in my life forced me to turn to the Lord. And I had to realize that I was not in control. God had to be in control, and I had to yield my life over to Him. And over a short period of time, I came to understand about salvation through the blood of Christ, and that I was a sinner. And that was the yielding of my life at that point in my life. Since then, I'm a mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother. God's been really good.
All right. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at just the verses that talk about the end times preparedness and staying alert, watching, and recognizing. We see in Matthew 24 and just time and time again, actually, that the Bible tells us these commands. And I used to think, I wonder why God keeps giving these same commands like over and over. And the more that I've studied this, the more I realize that's exactly what we need. We need to be able to recognize the signs when they're happening as the end gets there. And the only way we're going to do that is if we're watching with Scripture. So these passages that I have here can certainly help with that, among others. But we know that the Scriptures compare the end times to labor pains that a woman goes through. And so when you start labor, it always starts out slow, usually. And so you have a contraction and then maybe an hour in between. And so when it first starts out, you get long rest periods or breaks. And so it is, I think, with the end times. The first disturbance will have a break and then another big disturbance or a disturbance in one part of the world. And it's just catastrophes and natural disasters will just start to increase. Okay, along with other descriptions of how the governments are going to be behaving and how the people will be reacting and all of those things that will be going on. Babylon rising, a one world government starting to form, or one world like ordinance or group of people, okay? And certainly we see the push for that. And so as we see those things happening, sometimes when we're in a little rest period, we get tempted, I think, to just kind of get busy with life, with the regular things of life, and forgetting to use those times of rest to prepare biblically, to prepare spiritually, to change our mindset, and also even to prepare physically. Now, that is important that we prepare physically with the right mindset. So that's what we're going to try to talk about right here is point number 2, preparing to help. So I'm going to read in Matthew 25, 34 through 36, and you'll see what I'm talking about. It says, "Then the king will say to those on his right hand, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me.'" So we know that these activities are going to be things that will happen near the time of the end. And so during a time when there is not much water, we need to give water to people that are thirsty. So we need to kind of put some thought into water and having water to give. How can we be of help? And so it's not, we don't want to have the attitude of control, like I have to be the one to help. It might be, in fact, that what we have gets taken, and we're going to get to that in the next point. But we don't, so we're not depending on being the one to help, but we're willing to be the one to help if this is what God gives us. Okay, so also I want to make the point that we do not want to prepare like the world prepares. They will hear something on the news and they will panic, and everybody buys toilet paper. And it doesn't make a lot of sense. And you're like, why did everybody do that? I was telling Susan during COVID, I remember going to the grocery store right before everything was shutting down, and the fruits and vegetables departments seemed to be just fine and untouched. But the chips and the junk food was all gone. And I'm like, it's a pandemic when you need to be healthy.
Yeah.
And everybody's like eating junk food. That's not good. So, see, that is not, we don't want to be panicking and just like, giving into fear. That is not what we want to do. We want to be prepared. We want to be sensible. We want to have sound minds as we prepare. And we want to be preparing a little more long term, because we know that the end times is a thing to endure. That's another one of the commands. I don't have it up here, but it's one of them. Endure, right? So it's a long-term thing. It might be 7 years or more that we are having hard times, although I think the tribulation itself is 3.5 years. But when the Antichrist is coming after us. But no matter, it's not going to be just a month or two,
Right.
So being able to think differently is what we're trying to kind of bring across in this video. Okay, so being prepared to be neighborly and to help. And then point number 3, and this is a really important point, is that we might become the needy. We don't know where natural disasters will strike. We don't know where plagues are going to come and whatnot. We might become the ones in need. So we could have prepared and done things to prepare to give water to the thirsty and food to the hungry and clothes to the naked and visit those in prison. And we might have prepared, but then our situation might change and we might become the ones in need or without.
That's right.
And that's okay. We have to have the attitude of
It's okay.
it's okay. If God has determined that that's not how I'm going to help, then that's okay. Or if I'm the one that needs to be helped, I'm going to be at peace with that. And if you look on the screen, it says Daniel 11:32 through 33. This is a passage that talks about believers at the time of the end, near the time of the end. The Antichrist is gaining, he's about to get on the throne right there at that point. And it actually says he's going to use flattery and different tools to try to get Christians to turn away from the faith and believe he's God. Okay, but it says he's going to try to wear us out. But then it also says that we are going to be plundered. The Christians will be plundered. So what that tells us is the Christians have taken certain actions, and some of those actions are including being a certain amount prepared to where they have things to be plundered. So they actually get betrayed in that whole passage. It says that some people join them insincerely, and then they turn on them, and then some of the Christians with insight, they actually get plundered. So they had insight, they were prepared, but they got stolen from. And so we have to be able to be okay with that. Our hope is not in the preparing. Right. And so we're preparing because we're obeying God. We're saying, okay, God might want to use me to give drink to the thirsty or food to the hungry. And if not, then I'm going to be okay with that. So Susan has a story of something that happened to her. How long ago was that?
A year or two, because it was a couple of years ago that Ruth and I taught a little preparedness class at my house. We had 16 ladies from the church, and we went over the various aspects of preparing, which is food and water and communication and transportation and all of that. But the underlying assumption that we based it on was our trust in God, and that we have a responsibility to be a good steward of what we're given, but as she said, the outcome is up to the Lord. So I was doing all these, what I thought, great prepper things. I was storing up things, and I had tools and equipment and resources, and we had bought a freezer so I could buy, I bought a half of a cow, a half of a pig, and then I waited for all the good BOGO sales. And so I had over time, stored up all these veggies and fruits and everything.
Yeah, let me interrupt to just say
Yeah.
she's very good at watching for sales. She doesn't
Yeah.
quickly store up. She researches and stores up
Right.
like at a time when there's a BOGO, like you're saying, like buy one, get one
Right.
free, or this is going to be a big discount at this time. And so she
Yeah.
really plans and researches, which makes you all the more tempted to not want to lose it. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I thought I was being very careful, and when we had money and when there were sales. But one day, the freezer didn't close all the way, and it stayed open just a little bit, and it's off in a room that I don't go there every day. And one night at 11 o'clock at night, my husband had the flu. We were tired. I went out there, and here's my freezer dripping down onto the floor. The meat from the blood, the juice from the cranberries, the blueberries, and everything is draining all out on the floor. And we realized we had to empty out a freezer. And my husband got a large garbage can with a liner, and we filled up bag after bag after bag of food that I had so carefully, invested in. But I can say that day, and I've told Ruth this, everything I put in, the package of meat, the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. The Lord giveth. God knew. And it was a big wake-up call for me to realize I can prepare, and I should, and I have since replenished. But it was a spiritual test,
Yeah.
really, for me to be able to, in that moment, say, it's okay.
All right, so now I just want to talk about, just some good ideas and ways of thinking. If you hear people say regularly, I'm sure you hear Christians, probably Christians, even no matter what their end times position is, you hear them saying that they think we're living near the end, that the end times is approaching. Okay, and it just seems to be the general idea. And so, just kind of thinking this through, what are some good things that we can do in the meantime that can get us prepared? Number one, minimizing. Now, I am not suggesting to be an extreme minimalist and buying a tiny home and selling everything. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying to be more careful with what you buy, how much you keep, getting things ordered in your home, just living with less, clearing out, cleaning up, letting go of things, not in a frenzy, but just have a different mindset of like, do I really need these things? These are things that are things of luxury and they're just taking up space and it's kind of cluttering my house. Just minimizing and decluttering. We'll get to why in just a minute. Okay, so then let's talk about getting out of debt. If you're in debt, you are easy to control. Okay, and so I'm just going to read here in Proverbs 22:7. It says, the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is a slave to the lender. Okay, so we do not want to be in that situation. It just makes us just susceptible, more susceptible. So look to get out of debt, spend money differently. Think before you buy. So look at your cart. Something I like to do is look at my cart before I check out. It was really fun to put it in the cart. I was dreaming. It was really fun. And I was like, oh, that would look so pretty wherever. But then look at your cart and think, do I really need this? Is it practical? And then just go ahead and put things back, or say to the cashier, I'm not going to get this time. And so just learn to buy less and then take that money and put it towards debt. And try really hard to get out of debt with your cars, your house, and other items. If you can't afford it, say no.
Yeah, and
Don't
be
buy it.
content. We don't have
Correct.
to have brand new cars and brand new refrigerators and brand new everything. We can learn to live on less and be happy.
Correct. And not everything needs to be fixed. It's kind of funny. People will be like, oh, well, they'll make jokes about different things like, oh, well, the fan in the schoolroom, it's been like that for a while. And I was like, yeah, I don't even tell my husband about that one. Because usually if there's things that need to be fixed, I'll tell him. So if there's a plumbing problem, I'm going to tell him right away,
Right.
Because that's really important. But there's some things where it's like, okay, that doesn't have to be fixed. We don't really have to have that. And so just kind of thinking differently in the area of how you spend your money and being more wise. And then you will be able to make better decisions for even preparing and other things. Okay, and then lastly, getting things in order because Christians are going to be under scrutiny. So even before the Antichrist gets here, I think during the time of Babylon, we're probably going to be in scrutiny, because if you look at Matthew 24, before you see the abomination of desolation, which is definitely the Antichrist, you see that we're brought before kings and governors and rulers, and we're there to give witness. Okay. And so in massive numbers around the world, Christians are going to be brought into courts. Okay. And so we are supposed to view it as not an opportunity to defend ourselves, even if we're being slandered. Now we might say, no, I didn't do that. But then really it says it's an opportunity to give the gospel.
That's right.
We're there to witness. And so let's say that you know this is coming because the Bible already says it's going to happen. And I know for me, let's say that with homeschooling, if I can get certain things in order to where if I was taken to court or I was taken to prison for 6 months to a year, and I have things labeled and organized, then people can step in, do a little homeschooling while I'm gone, and then I can step back in and keep going. And then same thing if whoever in your family is taken to prison, if you have communicated things, written things down, labeled things, gotten them in order, have a file cabinet where things are labeled so that people can kind of step in, fill your shoes temporarily, and then maybe you get released from prison. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you've
But just
given
kind of
me
preparing for
a
that.
new to-do list.
Yeah.
I got to go home and
Okay.
do some of this now.
Yeah. So just kind of having the idea of if you're in and out of prison, because we read stories about missionaries, and they'll get taken to prison for 6 months here and a year here, and then they're home for 2 years, and then they get they give the gospel again in another place, and they get taken to prison. And so we have to be able to kind of make it to where someone could fill our shoes, and then we can come back into our own shoes, and then they fill our shoes again, and just like that. So just kind of thinking, differently about that. Do you have anything you want to add to?
No, that's good. I'm
Okay.
convicted.
Okay. Here I just want to show you at least 2 verses that talk about during the end times and how water is going to be something that is scarce. And of course, I already shared that from Matthew 25, but here we see that there's a comfort once the Christians who have come out of the tribulation go into heaven. Here in Revelation 7, it says you're no longer going to thirst. You're no longer going to be hungry. So that means that we will have been thirsty and we will have been hungry. And so we know this is going to be a problem. And then here in Revelation 8:11, we can see that there is a time where there's a certain portion of, in fact, 1/3 of the fresh water is going to be made into something bitter, undrinkable, to the point where the people who drink it actually are going to die. So we can see that water is going to be affected. One of the last things that's going to happen near the very end is all the water in the entire world is going to be turned to blood. So that's going to be a thing. I don't believe we're going to be here for that. That's my opinion. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. But certainly that's dire straits right there. So that's why we're talking about this. That's why we're going to be talking about water and thinking about, well, if we know that a time of not enough water is coming, what can we do? What can we do, and how can we think differently so that we can at least, be helpful and neighborly to others? Okay, so here, this just real quick, I just want to remind you that, of course, we see in Revelation 13 that we have the mark of the beast. Now, that is a 3.5-year time frame where that is taking place somewhere in that last 3.5 years, okay, of human history as we know it before Jesus comes back. But during that time, we know we will not be able to be using the grocery stores, the regular way of living, probably not city water. All that stuff will be paid for by having the mark of the beast. And so because we won't be a part of that, we're going to have to get our water somewhere else. So we're going to be thinking about that. And so, Susan, how much water do people usually use?
Well, I did some research and I got anywhere from 80 to 100 gallons a day per person. So if you're thinking of you need 80 gallons for everybody in your household, and you're thinking of having to carry that or pump that or store that, we might use less water.
Yeah. Practice
one
using
thing.
less water.
Yeah.
Taking shorter showers, doing, maybe
Right.
using less, kind of training yourself a little bit in that mentality is not a bad idea. But then also, we're going to talk about like, what do we do? What will we have to do at that point? Because that's 3.5 years of time,
Right.
right? And if the bare minimum, I think you said is 1 gallon a day, and that's like barely making it.
Well, a gallon a day is for drinking water, maybe washing your hands. That's not going to run your dishwasher
Yeah.
or your washing machine or whatever. That's emergency. That's 3 days to get you by until the problem can be fixed. If it can't be fixed, you have to have the next stage of preparedness.
And we're going to talk about all those stages. If it's just a little crisis that's only 3 days, if it's something that's medium, 6 months, and if it's something that's 3.5 years. So we're going to talk about all that in the next slide. Okay, Susan, so get us started on how much water we need and just introduce us to what we need as it pertains to water.
Right. Well, we talked about the fact that 1 gallon a day is a minimum just for drinking and like hand washing, but we do need water for other uses. For drinking, we need safe water. But in addition to drinking, we need somewhat safe water for washing hands, bathing, washing dishes, laundry and showers. You may have a garden that you're counting on for your food supplies. You may have animals that you need to care for. They're going to need water. So thinking of all those things together, we can't really take it for granted that the spigot's just always going to be there.
Right, which is what we definitely do now. So then what do we need? What are the
Well,
four things?
we need, first of all, we need a source of water. For most of us now, it's the faucet. There are many people around the world, and certainly even in the United States, who live what we call off-grid, who have their own water source, and they store it and purify it. But for most of us at this point, it's coming from our city. But wherever it comes from, if the faucet turns off, we need a way to store it. And for long term, we need to be able to store larger amounts. We need a way to purify it if it's going to use for drinking and cooking and such like that. And then if water is stored, it has to be moved. It has to be moved from the rivers and streams, from your storage tank, or even just your downspout through the window into your toilet for flushing.
Right.
There's a lot of aspects to it.
All right, so we're going to look at those one at a time in the slides right up ahead.
Okay.
Okay, so first let's talk about sources of water. Where can you get water? And it's important for us to start thinking about what water is near you.
Right.
One thing I did, I know when I first started thinking about this, was I got a map that was like a handheld map, because in certain emergencies you're not going to have internet
Right.
and phones, and so a handheld map and just knowing where lakes, rivers, streams, all that stuff is.
Correct.
And then also another thing you can do is look up where your water is in your area, where the water is more likely that you could even dig for water if you ever got to
Right.
that extreme.
That's the resource,
Yeah.
research that you need to be doing. Yeah.
Right. And so we're going to divide this up into three different steps. Number one, if you just have a 3-day emergency.
Right.
And then if you have more long-term, 6 months or more. And then 3 is if it's a long-term.
Okay.
So,
So, you would think of these, obviously, as long as you can get city water, that's the thing we're used to. You might want to look at your property and see if it's suitable for a well. You do need permitting. You need to know in Florida, there's a high water table, so sometimes you can't get water. But that is a good source because it probably will be replenishable if you have a good pump and such. If there's any lakes or rivers around you, springs, Florida has a lot of springs, and of course rainwater, and that's one of the things we'll be talking about because rainwater, we have our seasons, but rainwater keeps coming, and that is a way that you can be independent, is with rainwater. And of course you'll then have the water that you have personally stored, which will be limited, the amount of storage that you can have, but at least for the short-term things, you can store water correctly. We'll do that.
okay. So then what should we have if there's just a short-term 3-day?
3 days, you need a gallon per person per day, and you need those stored correctly so that they're potable. This is water that's going to keep you alive. This is not, getting stains out of clothes and stuff. This is just to keep you alive, and so it needs to be purified water. It has to be treated, and even water that's treated doesn't stay safe for too long. So you need to know how long you can keep it, where you can put it. We'll get into that.
Okay. Okay, so Susan, now we're going to talk about storing water, and we're going to
Right.
try not to let it leak into purifying water and all the others. Sometimes they kind of
Yeah, there's
intertangle
different
themselves.
different aspects to it.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so storing water. What
Okay.
are some of our
Well,
options?
obviously, you can buy bottled water at your grocery store in individual size servings, in gallon jugs. Um, that's always good. It is temporary, they do expire. Um, you can buy rain barrels to catch water from your downspouts. If you buy food grade and you have a good system of making sure nothing gets in the tank and you treat it, you could use rain barrels. Um, you can use larger tanks. You can buy online um, large 600 gallon, 800 gallon, whatever, multiple tanks. If you get to the point where you have a system to store large amounts of water, which, that's our goal if we're talking about 7 years.
Yeah.
But we do have to get started. So if you get started somewhere, one of the things that I have come across is something called the Water Brick. It's waterbrick.org. And this was actually started by a company who wanted to provide water to third world countries that didn't have safe drinking water. And they devised the container. Each one holds about 3.5 gallons. It has a handle on it. It's I can carry 3.5 gallons, 8 pounds per gallon. Um, and they're bricks like Lego blocks. So they stack on top of each other. And actually, in these third world countries, they drop them by parachute. The people drink the water and they save the bricks and they build structures out of them. So they're very strong and they're designed for water, storing potable water. We'll get into the purification later.
So Susan was definitely telling me that water can go bad. So when you're storing water, you have to think about that. Is there really is an expiration date? And so if you store your water in plastic, it can leach. Is that what you were calling it? It can leach the plastic into the water. And if you store it in a warm place, like say a garage, and it gets hot all the time. We ran into this actually just a few weeks ago when the hurricane came, and there was this water we stored in our garage. And then a friend had just said to me, like weeks before, they were like, if it's warm, if it's been warm, it actually will go bad. It can get bacteria in it. And I'm like, oh, well, I certainly didn't know that. So we didn't drink it. I'm really glad I had that conversation because, we didn't end up losing our power, thankfully. But if we had,
Sure,
we would have been, putting that to use. So I'm glad that I found that information. So, it needs to be climate controlled.
yeah,
And
also the point about food grade. So water bricks are food grade. That means you can keep food in it without plastics leaching into the food or water in the container. Most plastics that we would buy things in plastic will leach out the chemicals from the plastic, and that's what we're trying to avoid for long term.
Sure. And then now you said that you can actually with these water bricks, you can get it treated so in such a way that you buy not only the water bricks but something that treats it and it will stay good for 5 years.
Yes, if you take a single water brick and you fill it full of tap water, you can put in regular chlorine and it will last for about 6 months in climate controlled place. Mine fit under my bed, so this is perfect. But if you want longer term storage, they do have a treatment, little bottle of, I guess it's super chlorine, which will allow it to stay safe for 5 years if it is totally sealed. And these water bricks will totally seal. They've got the handle. You can buy a pump to pump it out with, makes it a little easier. They have faucets, turn it on its side, and you can just have a spout. I mean, they're very user friendly.
Okay. All right. So then we get that at waterbrick.org and they're about $10
Could
per
be more. I can't.
something
I
like that.
can't remember.
And then of course if you're going to treat it, it's going to have a little more cost, right?
Yeah,
The
you buy
treatment.
the treatment.
Okay. Now, water purification, I feel like I learned so much talking to Susan about this topic that I didn't know. So fill us in.
Well, it's probably a little more complicated than I even know, but I'll give you the basics, okay? So, if you have a water source but you don't know if it's safe to drink, you can boil the water, and that will kill the bacteria and some of the parasites. Maybe not the viruses and not the heavy metals, lead and mercury and such. But in an emergency, you can boil water and you can drink it. You can also treat the water with chlorine, your regular chlorine from the store. And if you do about 8 drops per gallon, it will, you give it time to settle, you shake it a few times, and you wait 20 minutes. It should kill also the bacteria in there. So that's a emergency way.
And you don't need to do both of those at the same time.
Correct.
So it's either or.
One or the other.
They accomplish the same thing.
Right.
Yeah.
If you don't have a heat source, you're not going to boil water. If you don't have any chlorine, you're not going to do that one. There are gravity-fed filters that are excellent, and they may be a good investment for everyday use because they will take out everything bad in it. I mean, some of the filters have very, very fine filters, and it's gravity-fed, so you don't need any power supply. You do have to replace the filters.
So you would have to buy filters ahead of time if this
You
was,
have to buy filters
if this
ahead
was
of
your
time.
plan. Yeah.
Right. Iodine is also a treatment, and I would refer you to some research before you did that, because there's a certain type of iodine, and those with thyroid problems or pregnant women are advised not to. But it is a usable way to do it. If you've been a camper or an outdoors person, you may have heard of a water straw, which is basically a filter in a straw-like thing that you can actually go to a water source, drink from a lake, pond, or whatever, and it will purify water to a drinking capacity. You can also buy bottles with the water straw in it, so you fill up the bottle, it filters it, you've done the same thing. So you can buy small size filters. It would be more for emergency use, travel or whatever, but it wouldn't be bad to keep one in your car or, a second home or whatever like that.
And you can also get online chemical tablets as well. That's
Right.
another option.
Right.
Okay.
And
And then what about if you have a water bottle and how can you purify it in a water bottle?
The sun UV rays will actually purify the water enough to be potable. So if you have a clear container and you take it out in the yard in sunlight, put it on a dark surface for best results. Leave it there for several hours at least, and it will kill the bacteria. I mean, it's just like boiling. It just has to get to that point. I mean, all living things begin to die at about 110 to 113 degrees, so it doesn't have to be totally boiling, but it has to be at that level long enough to kill the bacteria.
Okay. Okay, so now we're going to talk about moving water from one location to the next. Of course, it's pretty heavy. It's eight pounds
per gallon.
Per gallon.
So, some of you young people might not have a problem, but it would be for me. Hence, you will learn to conserve water.
Right.
If you have to carry it. But obviously, you can carry water. The water bricks or anything that's potable that you can carry would work. You can move water through troughs for irrigation, for instance. Obviously, you can have a pump, and whether it's a pump for your well or it's a pump that's pumping water from one place to another. So you've stored water in these big containers. Now you need to get it to your house or to where you're preparing food or taking a shower. And so you're going to need a pump. A 55-gallon barrel, you can put in a sump pump. I understand they cost $100 or so, and you can pump out the water enough maybe for your toilets or for whatever. But you might want to consider a hand pump too if you don't have electricity. There's gas-powered ones. Obviously, the water that you're collecting on your roof is going to be gravity-fed. So that's going to come down your downspouts into whatever size barrels that you have to catch it. That's going to be limited supply. I mean, a 55-gallon barrel is a pretty good size to have in your yard.
And we have a picture of that. This is something you can find
That's a good idea of a water catchment. They've used a small building there and fairly small tank, but for gardening or animals or something, it could be real handy.
Yeah, and this really kind of resonated with me just in the last, 2 months when we had these hurricanes, and they had the hurricane crisis that happened, in the Carolinas and some of Tennessee. And, I remember hearing a lot of people tell that they were like, well, it worked out great because we actually had a full week's worth of water for everybody. So we were
Good for
okay
them.
because like
Yeah.
trees fell down and
Right.
roads were gone. So they couldn't get to the store, but they had water. And so this is just the most important thing that you need before even food is water.
Right.
And so that's why we're kind of starting with that. It's just kind of like having that in mind, because if natural disasters are going to increase, we just need to have a different mindset and just be thinking this way and just have knowledge. I think that one thing we really need to remember is just gaining skills, learning skills, and gaining knowledge about each of these topics, because little pieces of information can be really important to helping in these kinds of things. So, is there anything else you want to?
Well, it's good to share knowledge too. I mean, we enjoyed having our little class, and those ladies have stayed fast friends, and we share
Yeah.
ideas all the time as we learn different skill sets. So
Yeah, and
it's
quite a few have started gardens and making their own stuff, and
Sure.
kind of just becoming less dependent and just thinking differently, and just kind of thinking, what can I do even on a regular basis to spend less and become more knowledgeable and how to make some things on my own. So I'm making their own
Exactly.
soap, their own lotions, their own cleaners, that kind of stuff. And so it's just good to gain the skills and learn the knowledge to help each other out during these times.
Amen.